Hi, and welcome. I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, Presbyterian minister of 3 congregations in Eastern Ontario. And thank you for joining us for our Bible study on the book of Revelation. Last time, we looked at Revelation chapter 6, part 1, the opening verses 1 to 8, that deal with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Today, we're going to look at the rest of the chapter that explores the idea of the day of the Lord. The 5th seal is opened. If you read it, starting at verse 9, when he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who'd been slaughtered for the word of God and for the testimony they had given. They cried out with a loud voice, Sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long will it be before you judge and avenge our blood on the inhabitants of the earth? They were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number would be complete, both of their fellow servants and of their brothers and sisters who were soon to be killed as they themselves had been killed. The 5th seal is in some ways very clear. It's not easy being a Christian. There is a cost. And living in North America, we don't always know, we aren't always sensitive to the cost of our faith. So take a couple moments and think about it. What does it cost you to be a Christian? You might think, are Christians being persecuted today? It's not something we often talk about in the mainline churches, and it's something that we are probably not aware of. Can you think of people who've paid the price for their faith? And then Revelation 6:10, the martyrs utter key phrase. Okay, so those are the key questions. So if we stop and think, what is the cost of being a Christian? And are we willing to pay that cost? This past week, I saw an article about someone who is, I gather, supposed to be very good in baseball, football, I can't remember which. Obviously, I'm not a sports, very knowledgeable about sports. But the challenge, the question in the headline is, this person is an observant Jew. So he will not play on the Sabbath. And how does that impact his career as a professional baseball player or football player or whatever, soccer player, whatever sport it was? And you stop and think, how many Christians play football or baseball and play on our Sabbath, the Lord's Day on Sunday? Do we know of any sports people who say, my faith is more important, I will not desecrate the Lord's Day by playing or competing on Sunday? Or do we just say, I can do what I want? Many of us in North America, we don't see ourselves as persecuted because we're willing to give up a lot. We're willing to accommodate a lot. And then there is no cost for us being a Christian because there really is no difference between us and the rest of society. For other Christians, they say, you're accommodating too much. And so we've got these struggles within the church of, are you accommodating or are you listening to the Holy Spirit leading you in new directions. And it's a big struggle in many denominations today. There is a cost to being Christian. Some people say it's too high a cost when we took prayer out of schools. Yes and no. I'm not sure. I don't think the churches responded properly. We needed to do something like the Jews have done and like the Muslims are doing, of creating our own schools, or even just classes after school. You go to day school where you learn this, and you go to religious school where you learn that. And we didn't step up to the plate. And so we're trying to force the government to do what we should be doing. Different topic. But it reflects this challenge, this tension between us and society. And how far do we bend before we no longer are Christian? There is a cost. Where do we plant ourselves and say no more? If you stop to think of people who've taken a stand for their faith, you can think of people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And he was involved in a plot to assassinate Hitler. Was that the wrong decision on his part? It certainly doesn't seem Christian. And yet, when you're reading that underlying base that he's operating from, is there is a cost, and somewhere you have to take a stand. Mahatma Gandhi was not a Christian, and yet he's profoundly influenced by Christianity, by the Sermon on the Mount. And in a way, his own way, he's tried to put into practice Christian principles and ideas of value of individuals, of turning the other cheek. And he paid the price. He was assassinated. Martin Luther King, same thing. There is a cost to being a Christian. How prepared are we to paying it? Are Christians today persecuted? Are we aware of their persecution? The answer is probably not. And I have a slide to show you some of the countries where the persecution is going on. And maybe we in the comfortable churches, in the comfortable pews, need to be more aware of that cost of following Christ. The challenge, the cry of the martyrs. How long? How long are bad things going to happen to good people? When are you going to act? This is probably one of the most important questions or cries that people of faith utter. We know what's right and what's wrong, and we see the wrong getting ahead. How long is it going to be before you act? God, and the answer that they get, wait just a bit longer. There's still a few who can be saved. There's still a few who have to make that stand, that choice. Don't worry, it's coming. It's coming. Here's some map from Christianity Today that shows persecution, lots of persecution in Russia. And this is from 2020. And then China. And China's a very interesting situation. Afghanistan, India, all these countries where Christians are persecuted, and you get casual to high levels of persecution. And of course, we'll have it here too, but it's not as obvious. We're not as aware of it as I've said. In China, in some parts, there are official religions. And if you are an official religion, you have certain protection. There's also give and take situations where these illegal churches are allowed to exist, because they do good. They feed the hungry. They get people off the street, uh, and so on. And so they're allowed to continue because they're actually helping keep costs down by the state. But when they get too big, then the government comes in and um, basically arrests the people, disband them, force them underground, and they have to move and start over. In India, there's a rise in nationalist type of Hinduism, which persecutes anyone else, anyone who's different. And we'll see signs of this in other countries in Asia as well. But persecution happens not just in Asia, not just in Africa. It also happens in Europe. It happens in North America and probably South America and Australia as well. Another interesting thing you might try is look at the day of the Lord and how it's being described. And again, I'm going to read from chapter 6. I'm going to read the opening of the sixth seal. So from verse 12 on. When he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and there came a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood. The stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree drops its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll rolling itself up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth and the magnates and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone, slave and free, hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? This is the day of the Lord, where there's this suddenly we've got not just this conflict on earth among nations and pandemics and wild animals and everything, but it's a cosmic conflict. The stars, the moon, the suns, they're all playing a part, and we're sort of caught on the receiving end. But again, this is not anything that's new to John. You find references to it in the Old Testament, and I've picked some of them. And again, what does it tell you about the day of the Lord? Okay. So the day of the Lord has very powerful imagery. And I asked you to look up Masada and then to think of where this kind of imagery comes into play and is very destructive. Well, Masada, and we're not going to, how much was history and how much was political expediency in our historical accounts. The Jews rebelled against Rome, and Rome sent in legions to destroy this rebellion. Jerusalem was captured, Jews are banned from the city, and the temple is destroyed. Jews flee. The carnage that happened in Jerusalem was horrible. And survivors really felt they were living the last days. I mean, the temple of God has been destroyed. What else are you going to think that this cosmic battle between forces of good and evil are playing out in your day? And the Romans are the forces of evil. They're the darkness, and they're destroying God's people, the good guys, the armies of the light. Very apocalyptic vision. Many of the survivors ended up in Masada, which was a fortress that had been built by King Herod. It was impenetrable, high up, and there's only like a snake path that could, or serpent path, whatever it's called, to go up. And that path is so narrow that it's basically one person at a time, not two by two, but one by one. So at the top, you're just going bing, 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 throw stones, throw arrows, whatever, and you can knock off any army because they can't really come up in numbers and destroy you. The Jews resisted. They held Masada for a number of years. Eventually, the Romans built a ramp up Masada and um, then set fire to the outer walls. The Jews built an inner wall, but the fire eventually destroyed that. When the Romans walked into the city as conquerors, into Masada, they found corpses. The people had chosen death over capture by the Romans. From their perspective, they were in this cosmic war. Sons of light, sons of darkness. And as God's people, as sons of light, they could not surrender to the darkness. And they preferred to take their own life rather than be taken away as slaves and sold into captivity. So 960 people, I believe, died. There were a few survivors. The impact Masada had on world history at the time was enormous because it really showed that Rome won in the end, but it took Rome years before they could get up and conquer it. Rome was not the invincible power that so many countries had, so many people had believed. And you start seeing small rebellions against Rome from this point on. Within Judaism, there was another impact. Apocalyptic literature with this sort of cosmic battle. Everything is now epic proportions, light and darkness, good and evil, and you have to decide which side you're on, and it's better to die than surrender. And Judaism basically said, no, we don't want any strand that is basically suicidal in nature. So you start putting up a wall around Judaism to keep out some of this apocalyptic fringe movements. And Christianity was one of them. And that was marked probably the final rupture between Judaism and Christianity. Because before then, Christianity had been a branch, a sect within Judaism. But after that, after Masada, after the fall of the temple, Christianity began to be seen as being a religion in its own right. If we stop and think about how this comes into play, and we see it in some of the suicide cults, whether it's Jonestown, whether it's the Solar Temple, or Waco, Texas, and I'm sorry I don't remember the guy's name there, but they start seeing that their followers are the saved, the chosen, the pure, and the rest of society is the enemy. This is one of the defining beliefs of a cult, is you're isolated where you think you're the good guys and everyone else is the evil one. And then if people challenge you, like the army, police, start saying, wait a second, and you have that choice to surrender to the darkness or kill yourself for the light, and you end up with suicide cults. All of that comes, in a sense, out of Revelation chapter 6 and following, because you're creating that situation of a cosmic conflict between good and evil. Which side are you on? Again, you might check out some of the imagery where you've got a very intriguing art piece here. It's The End of the World by John Martin, I believe, and it's on Wikipedia. And you're seeing people down here almost begging to be hidden there's nowhere safe. The elements are colliding, whether it's earthquakes or fires or floods. Uh, Here it's more earthquakes. Everything's sort of colliding, and it's complete devastation. Think of the movie 2012. And as the plane is flying over and California is sinking. I mean, that's your day of the Lord that they're sort of building on. Um, Cosmic things, people get very nervous about asteroids hitting the earth, and that great movies coming out of it, but they're all playing on this imagery of day of the Lord, when the world, the cosmos itself, is attacking earth, and we're caught, we're trapped in this inferno that's unfolding around us. So that's it for the day of the Lord, for chapter 6. And there's the bibliography of where the pictures came from. And it's exciting. I am on vacation for the next couple of weeks, so there's no movies, no videos for chapter 7 yet, but we will continue at least for a few more chapters in Revelation before taking a break. So thank you for joining me. Once again, I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Caver, and thank you for being part of this Bible study on the book of Revelation. Take care and God bless.